So answering your questions in 2019, this is for John Tomorrow, who commented that his bass and guitar recordings were really noisy, and how do you remove noise from those audio recordings? Well, I've made another video about removing noise and hum and hiss and that sort of thing, which is also on my channel. But to answer John's point specifically, he also mentioned that the Korg keyboard or the digital synths and things like that he recorded didn't have the noise on. So it implies that the recording software is okay. This is unless, of course, they are software synths, in which case there is a different issue here. Now, most modern sound cards, really anything that is a USB or Firewire or anything like that, even GarageBand, they are fairly good with their noise levels in terms of the noise floor. That's what we talk about when we have a signal range, which is from essentially 0 to maximum. The noise needs to be as low as possible. Now, guitars, guitar amps, effects pedals really are the enemy of that sort of noise floor, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you. I've got my Vox AC30 set up with a Strat and a set of stomp boxes, which you can see in the other camera that appears now. I've got a series of things, and they all go into my guitar amp. At the moment you're hearing straight through, no effects. So I've got a mic in front of my amp here, which is just a clean standard guitar signal. Now, if I unplug this mic is in front of the amp and it's being recorded as well, so you can hear exactly what's happening. If I unplug this now, there's less noise coming from it, less hum. Why is the hum there? Well, first of all, a pickup on a guitar is going to generate noise of its own. Indeed, some pickups were marketed in the 1990s that said noise less written on it, which isn't actually true. Every single electronic component, even just a resistor, has noise of its own that it imparts onto a circuit. So it's always the sort of chief aim of a designer is to use as fewer components as possible, or in the most efficient way to generate the least amount of noise. And also there are different components of manufacturing quality that then reduce the noise even further. So starting with the most basic one, where you sit in your studio with your guitar makes a massive difference. For example, if I plug this back in and then turn the volume up and then have my guitar too close to the amp, I get hum. And it can be that the angle at which I stand. So it's going to make a massive difference, and it might not be noticeable at the time until you listen back to the guitar on its own and think, what's all that noise on it? It could be where you sat. For example, computer monitors aren't particularly friendly to pickups either. If you have a mobile phone in your pocket and it's in awake mode, so switch your mobile off, or I'm going to set it to aeroplane mode. Aeroplane mode, however, still generates a bit of processing because it's a computer. You've got a computer in your pocket, so that can live on the side as well. Sight yourself away from any other electrical things like any transformers, speakers or amplifiers, including the one you're playing through, so you could stand over there, for example, to play and negate that, or rather reduce that noise even further. Now, many guitarists have also distortion pedals in their setup. They're going to generate a lot of noise as well. So of course, the level is going to increase, but even with the distortion on, if I set the level here to be roughly the same sort of level as my clean signal, you're still going to get more noise out of your distortion pedal because it's an analog circuit. Analog circuitry generates lots and lots of noise. There's many transistors in each of these pedals that is going to add a level of noise as it goes through. So if I have maybe the compressor on, this is where the problem starts to really escalate. A compressor is something that squeezes the top level of your audio signal level down towards the bottom. The idea being that the range of sounds is less, and therefore you can push the makeup gain of the compressor up, which allows you to hear that part over everything else in your mix. It comes at a price, because when you're squeezing the top level down and then bringing everything up, you're bringing the noise floor up as well, which makes it more noticeable. You think, well, why have a compressor in your lineup? Well, if you're doing a solo on a clean level, for example, there are lots of different note sort of loudnesses there. Every note was pretty much at the same level there. You may want that to, once again, cut over your mix. So a compressor is an enemy when it comes to noise. If you have that like the phaser on, and your wah-wah pedal on, and your compressor on, and your overdrive on, you get this through your amp before you've even started. It sounds like something from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop of the early 1970s. Bass players. Whenever I record bass, sometimes I put it through a compressor before it's even got to the recording stage. I've got to be really, really careful about how I do that. You've got to put it through a preamp, then your compressor, so that it means that you are essentially squeezing the signal level down from your preamp going straight into your computer. If you record without a preamp, even a bass guitar, a passive guitar, and this is passive, these pickups are generating noise of their own 24/7. They will always give you a bit of noise. So it's very important to make sure that the position of your guitar with respect to your amp, the pedals you're using, the power supply of the pedals is also massively important. The power supply that I've got here is quite a cheap one, but it seems to work okay. Some power supplies that you buy that are marketed for guitar processors, they generate clicking noises and of their own because they use something called a switch mode power supply, and they're not all that great. Some of them, you can pay a lot of money for a guitar power supply. Leads, the cables you're using. A guitar is an unbalanced signal, so it's picking up that as well. Even though you've grounded it inside the guitar, there's all sorts going into this cable from everywhere, from microwaves, from mobile phones, from computer processors, from transformers, from lighting systems, from everything. So I've got 10 effects pedals here, which means that I've got 20 connections because each one's got an input and an output. Every time you have a jack plug in your chain, you are adding noise because of connection issues or mains issue, hum issues, or whether the jack plug, whether the socket has proper spring-loaded contacts, whether there's any dirt on them, whether there's any grease, or whether there's any moisture on them. It's all going to have a major effect on what you end up with at the end. So checking your cables, it's worth spending good money on a very nice guitar lead, so that when you plug it in a studio, you can be sure that the recorder is taking everything down that you're playing with nothing, minimal problems in between. So I hope that answers a bit of the question on noise with guitar and bass. The problem exacerbates itself when you have an active instrument, because you have a preamp inside the guitar or the bass that is generating more noise of its own, and it's not always for the best with that. So a passive guitar or a passive bass very often is a nice way to go when you're recording. So there we go. I hope that helps.